It's Florida State versus North Carolina prediction time.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith. Thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today is Prediction Friday. Noles, Tar Heels. Who's going to win and why? I'm going to break down the game from Florida State's offensive perspective, defensive perspective, what they need to do to get a victory, or it will be the Tar Heels coming out with a W. So let's get started with Florida State's offense. And of course, the humongous question here is the quarterback battle. Brock Glenn still battling with Kromenhoek. Last week, Kromenhoek played better, but will that continue? Who starts? How do they rotate? Why do they use the plays they do? There are so many questions and so many theories. I'm going to delve into that first. So here we go. Number one, I'm going to guess, and this is truly a guess, that Brock Glenn starts because he's had more reps in practice. They are huge on the, I know people don't like this. That's how coaches are, not just at Florida State. On the guys that have had the most reps with the first team, how they played throughout the season and even fall camp. Glenn still has more experience. I expect him to start. That does not mean that he will be the one to finish or even begin the third quarter, and here's why. I want to see somebody that does all of the following. This is not a short list. It is not a friendly list. You still got to do it. This is why quarterback is hard. All of the following, specifically with protections, is what I'm concerned about the most in this game. Very complex. Carolina has 25 sacks this year, 11th in the nation. You screw around and get behind the chains. I don't care what your pass protection is. That's a problem. We're going to talk about the run game in a second, but just keep that in mind. Got to help your quarterback in that regard, no matter how experienced or talented he is. But get the play in fast. You must give Luke and Brock time, a lot of it, even more than normal, because, again, these are a redshirt freshman and a freshman quarterback. You must give them time to adjust to what they see. It's going to take them longer to read it, whether you like it or not, as a coaching staff. And this is what drives coaches nuts. They don't like change much. It's just true. And then two, you have to give them ability at their own discretion to change the play and or front. I'm concerned that Florida State doesn't believe that they're ready for that second part. If that is true, this game could be a disaster, because if you're not getting the play in fast enough and they have to look over to the line of scrimmage again to get a second part of the play, like get to the 15-second mark is where you can get info on the headsets. This could be a disaster. Carolina gets after it. I'm telling you, they are an aggressive defense with the way they get after the quarterback. They don't always take sound rush lanes, and that's something Florida State should hit. I'll talk about that in a second as well. But if they don't have plenty of time at the line to diagnose and then change a play, Carolina is going to have close to 10 negative plays in this game, if not 10. Florida State's O-line has not proven it's good. It's banged up. It doesn't have chemistry. Prove me wrong. I don't like the matchup up front. Carolina's defensive line is definitively better, and I'm being kind to Florida State's O-line. They also have a really good linebacker in Eccles, who's kind of a cleanup guy, old school linebacker that if you screw around, he'll get a few big plays like that too. And he's capable, as I talked about earlier this week on Locked On Seminoles, of getting a pick. Do not allow him to be a factor in that regard. Just limit him to the run game. So I'm hoping they don't throw it much to the middle of the field as a little extra note there. But once Florida State's into its game plan, short passes and bombs, I will be shocked based on some of the talent that UNC has in their secondary, that Florida State is going to just sit in the pocket, try to read for 4 seconds. Again, pass protection is not very good, and read the middle of the field. It's not going to go well. A couple of the guys, just to denote, again, if you didn't hear it earlier this week, like just one guy in particular, like Elijah Huzzy, he's a corner. That's a good player. He's a guy that's capable of making some big plays. And then the one that's in the middle of the field, he'll come up and go back. And Tavius Lane, He's been banged up. He only had a 57% ranking against UVA as an overall defensive player and only 53.7 against them in coverage. So I'm guessing he's banged up a little bit. If he's healthy, and again, we're not going to know, he can make a lot of big plays, picks, etc. He's a guy that will get in front of the football. I'm worried about him against the young quarterbacks. I don't care if it's Brock or Luke. Pass pro, again, you got to do better than you did prior, but you also have to be realistic as a coaching staff. They have multiple defensive linemen that will flat out be drafted after this year. Rucker, I'm just going to use him as one example. That's not a fun player for Florida State to take on. If Darius Washington isn't at left tackle, I'm very concerned because that means you're probably going to have to leave in Morlock or Landon Thomas or Amari Williams, whatever, to help chip and block. That kills your passing game, but your quarterback can't be sitting on his rear end either. I don't think they can block him one-on-one, among others. I'm not going to go through their whole list again, but they got some guys up front. But if you can protect for a little bit, here's the advantage. Come back to this. Not one of, but both of Brock and Luke can flat out run. It has been proven, and they have to take advantage of that in two ways. Designed runs. Carolina gets out of the rush lanes, whether it's true passing down or in 1st and 10. They're a little overzealous to, quote-unquote, pad their stats in the sack department. That's my opinion. Well, that'll help you get some sacks. It'll also give up some really humongous rushing totals. 3 weeks ago against Georgia Tech, against Haynes King's a really mobile guy, and their backups are mobile. I don't even know who play. I don't care, but they both can run. Zach Pyron's a pretty good athlete. They had 371 yards rushing. 371 and 5 scores against Carolina. However, in their last game against Virginia, they held them to 7 yards rushing. I have no idea what's going to happen there. I know Georgia Tech's way better up front. Don't get me wrong. But Florida State showed some gumption in the ability to run in the A-gap, of all places, against Miami. There needs to be, at minimum, 150 yards rushing against Carolina to win this game. And it's definitely doable. My only concern is that Toffoli will get wore down in this game. He's played a lot of snaps. He's over 300 snaps this year already. I think he's a warrior, but he passes or catches the ball in the passing game. He blocks a lot and he runs. He's probably beat up. That's just part of the position. He plays through it if he is, but you can't expect him to go out and run 60 plays in this game. Who else is going to play if Cam Davis is out? How effective will they be in pass protection and catching the football? Keziah and or Sam Singleton, Micaiah Danzig, like somebody else has got to step up and not just play, but be impactful, especially with the pass protection. That concerns me. So let's see how that goes. Also, third downs. Last game, I don't know what the deal was, but Florida State was better on 3rd and long than they were 3rd and short. Doesn't make any sense. They were 0 for on 3rd and short and 2 for 4 on 3rd and 9. Like those kind of stuff, like 8 to 10 yard, whatever. That's crazy. They have to be able to convert that. Part of that is play calling. Part of it's the other teams giving out scholarships too. But the quarterbacks just got to make some plays with their feet if they have to. I'm curious to see if they can do better. Again, Miami's defense is on a whole other level compared to North Carolina in terms of just raw talent from top to bottom. Carolina's talented, but not the same depth that Miami has. When they rotate guys in, they got some guys who are playing the NFL too that aren't starting. I don't think there are that many for Carolina. So that's important. Finally, the two that kind of go together, shot plays. If Florida State doesn't hit some shot plays, especially early, to give the crowd something to think about at Doak Campbell, and mix in, how about at least one, if not 2 or 3, trick plays. They don't have to be super complex. It can be jet sweeps as an extension of it, fakes like that. Just make them think. And then eventually, yes, reverse, double reverse pass, toss sweep to Toffoli. He throws it back to Luke Kromenhoek. They need a cheap touchdown in this game. You can create it on special teams or defense as well, but you're not going to consistently sustain drives against Carolina until otherwise proven because of your offensive line. You need chunk yardage plays. Prove me wrong on that as well, but I think Florida State is more apt to score on a 7-play drive as opposed to a 12-play. Why? Penalties, sacks, and just mental errors. Again, you got young quarterbacks. It's going to happen. you got to be 400 or 500 passes into your career before you get to average usually. They're certainly nowhere near that. I think there's going to be some dumb moments from just all the things going together. It's just going to look dumb, but it's really inexperience. Not even dumb. It's just they didn't know better. Got to go through it. To help them eliminate even being in that position, got to score on 20, 30, and 40-yard plays. FSU has the athletes. That is not in question. Ja'Kai Douglas on a streak, a double move by somebody like Hakeem Williams, a slant to Malik Benson, and he makes the safety miss. They've got the speed and the physical tools to score. And that doesn't even touch Tofili, who can score running or catching the football. He's proven it over and over in his career. Got to get these guys in space, and the play calling and execution are going to be the reason they do. Next up, we're going to talk a little more about the offense and transition into the D. That is next on Locked On Seminoles. Our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being passionate football fans isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all-day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, and agonizing second overtimes, which is why they've created the Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot. It's a special flavor called Fan Fuel, the energy shot made just for super fans like us, the fans who are first in the parking lot and who are last to leave. We see you. You know what else gives me and Florida State fans a big punch for this week? The moment when you're going to have a big play in the game. I just talked about the double move or the reverse, the flea flicker, whatever it is. You got to have something like that come up in this game. This is a big moment for Florida State. This is one of the last likely opportunities to win a football game. It's got to happen. So 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or iron out your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with 5 Hour Energy. Available on 5hourenergy.com, shipped nationwide. Just want to touch on a couple other things here with the offense. Which player does look a little more confident? Not only at quarterback, we've talked a lot about that, but at receiver. Is there any moxie with how that is after a big play? Like, are they setting up DBs with double moves, using good technique? Is there any chemistry between any of these young receivers and tight ends and one of the two, if hopefully not both, of the quarterbacks? Need to see that this week if they're going to win. And two, also want to see this team play turnover free. For the love of mankind, it's time to reduce the mental errors. And I know they've got young quarterbacks. That's got to happen. And it leads into this. For the defense to play good, they got to be in better situations they were against Miami. They didn't create any turnovers, but the offense also put them in some really bad spots with the turnovers and penalties, bad field position, etc. So the defensive keys are a little bit different than you might think. This is a really diverse offense skill-wise. It's not, honestly, a whole lot different than Miami. A little different in how they get it done, but position by position, they got NFL talent. Quarterback's having a pretty good year. He's not dominant, but Jacolby Criswell is an interesting player. And the guy that he's going to try to get it to is J.J. Jones. This is a receiver that will maim you. He has 26 catches, 493 yards, 19 yards per reception, and 4 touchdowns, 3 of which have come in the last 2 weeks against Georgia Tech and then 2 against Virginia. I'm not surprised that he's coming through, but here are a couple of the things to note about him. Whether it's a screen or a bomb, J.J. Jones will smoke you. Here are his totals on short receptions: 37, 25, and 31, and he caught a 31-yarder. Those are 4 explosives in one game. He is a nightmare. And he's not the only guy that's good. They have multiple receivers that can make plays. Nate McCollum's a guy that's a senior receiver that's pretty good. I don't think he's on JJ's level, but he is good. JJ's also 210 pounds. He's a red zone threat, by the way. Watch out for him on jump balls. But McCollum catching passes from Criswell is erratic. Here are his stats for a few games. 1 catch for 9, 10 for 128, 1 catch for 13, and then this last week, 4 for 57. Hasn't caught a TD this year, but you don't know what you're going to get from him in terms of how they game plan, how they use him. So I'm guessing, depending on how teams attack JJ in the game against Pittsburgh, they had to get the ball out quick. So he was probably the screen guy as part of it. And they probably took JJ away and ran some double coverage too. They'll throw it to him. The other part of this, in a conjunction, a few weeks back, their key player, he's not really a receiver, but he's a flex guy, Bryson Nesbitt, had wrist surgery. I'm assuming he's not playing, but you can't lose guys that are future NFL tight ends and think it's not going to impact the game. That changes whether they use more 12 personnel, how they have a slot as a tight end, different things. If they had Nesbitt, it would be really hard to beat them this week because that's another NFL player to go with the guy I'm about to mention, Omarion Hampton. The running back is arguably the nation's most all-around running back. He's a guy that I think will be very good in the NFL. Hampton's game total this year is the definition of consistency. He's got 6 straight games where he's over 100 yards. He's a touchdown machine. Third down and shorts are pretty automatic with him. It's not every time. Their offensive line's good. It's not insanely good in the run game, but here are his last 6 totals. 210, 139, 103, 106, 137, 105. He is going to get it done. I'm curious what Florida State's going to do because the game, anytime a team plays Pittsburgh, I use that as a barometer because they're so aggressive. His stats are pretty similar. So that tells me the O-line for Carolina is able to adjust to an aggressive D, blitzes, stunts, etc. They do not mess around. They get after it, try to create havoc. But he had, again, 23 for 106, 4.6 and 1. He will run between the tackles. They might use a little option with him, and they will definitely throw it to him a little bit too. They have to at least mitigate him. He averages roughly 5.5 yards a carry. If that is the case in this game, you're not beating him. You got to hold him to 4 yards per carry, really limit him on first downs, and make sure that he's not the definitive reason that Jacolby Criswell, he's an experienced player. He's not played a ton, but he's still experienced. Senior player for Carolina at quarterback. If he's in 3rd and 4 and less for most of the game, it's going to be hard. But Florida State can create a lot of negatives. That's the one thing I'm curious about. I think Florida State has a slight advantage in some ways. They've done much better in the pass game in terms of getting after the quarterback, but have been erratic against the run. Last week was terrible against Miami. They had 4 or 5 run gap fits that were just atrocious in the A gap. If they can alleviate that this week against Carolina, they could hold them to 100 yards. The extra caveat here, this is another week where they are facing a team with a very, not a slightly, a very mobile signal caller. Criswell is a guy that's not going to run all the time. He's a little bit more like Luke and Brock. He'll run if you give it to him, but he's more likely to, quote unquote, extend the play, keep his eyes down the field, and try to hit somebody, which quite honestly shows maturity as a quarterback. His game totals here recently, they're pretty consistent that he's not the most accurate guy, but he'll make big plays. He'll chuck it down the field, and their screen game gives him yardage that kind of inflates his numbers. But his last 4 games, 251, 269, 209, 293. Again, he's got a lot of speed and talent at receiver. They will screen you and short yardage you to death in terms of like 4-yard hitch or slant and rely on their athletes to make plays, take the pressure off Criswell, which is smart. But if he has to extend the play and you don't contain the edge or you don't do a good job with your pass rush lanes, that's 7-8 yards, 1st and 10 Tar Heels. They must be more disciplined. They did okay against Cam Ward and at times were really good. Still need to take another step forward as a defense this week because, quite frankly, Criswell is not a fun guy to play against either. He's not going to be confused by fronts that you run because he's a veteran. He's got a great running back who's going to get paid to play in the National Football League, and he has multiple receivers that he's proven to be comfortable with. So you're not going to shock him with a whole lot you're going to run. It's going to come down to technique, tackling in space, and staying in your lanes. Florida State's, that last one's my biggest concern because if they don't do a good job with that, even one play where Criswell, let's say, gets a 40-yard run or extends a play and hits JJ across the middle on a broken play and he gets a 40-yard touchdown can be the difference. Really concerned about that because Florida State, much like Carolina, the defense has given up far too many big plays just kind of randomly throughout the 2024 football season. Miami game was just the latest example of it. When I come back, it is final prediction time. North Carolina coming to Tallahassee. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you have a hunch in the middle of the football game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. This game I expect to be close throughout, but I also expect it to be one that is won or lost by the Seminoles based on the following premise that I've talked about throughout this show. Big plays. Now, big plays are defined differently depending on the person, but for me, it's going to be more mental than physical. The ability to not be selfish, stay in your rush lanes on defense. On offense, yeah, you need big plays, but you can't just force the ball into coverage. You're going to see different zone defenses, different fronts, and different blitzes this week. They're going to try and surprise the Florida State quarterbacks as close to a guarantee as you can possibly see. Carolina doesn't do that. That's on them. It's poor coaching. They're going to try to bait Florida State's young signal callers, Luke Kromenhoek and Brock Glenn, into mistakes that cost them the game. I know I would, and that's generally the open playbook against young signal callers. So why not this week? I think that the experience of Criswell not making as many mistakes will be the difference. I like North Carolina 27-16. I think they will tack on a late touchdown when Florida State's defense is tired. I think this will be like 20-16 mid fourth quarter, and then they'll finalize with a big play and win it. Florida State has shot itself in the foot too many times this year for me to feel confident in. It's that simple. Again, I got Carolina winning this one 27-16, and I really don't think it's that difficult to see why. Florida State is a mistake-prone football team with young signal callers battling it out for the starting position. I will see you again later this weekend on Locked On Seminoles. We're going to have a live show after the game. Everybody have a good one. I'll talk to you soon.